This is a 1941 Buick Roadmaster Convertible with the big straight 8 and dual carbs. And I'm going to ask JB to take us around it, explain details, talk about Buick of the era, and learn everything we can about this car and take you along. Okay, JB, it's time to go for a drive. Let's start this baby up.
Okay, now you remember that it has a starter on the floor. No. You just press the gas pedal, what you do is
it's literally under the gas pedal?
That's correct. Now, what I'm going to do is, firstly, I'm going to leave the ignition off, give it a couple of shots of gas.
Okay.
Then I turn it to the on position, if you notice.
Which is, by the way, turning left instead of right. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
then what happens?
Press on the gas. Starts the engine.
There you go.
There's a switch on the carburetor that activates the starter so that you don't have to sit there and crank and crank and crank.
Oh, so the button's not under the pedal. It's actually at the carburetor?
No, it's actually on the carburetor. So that linkage, when it goes to the carburetor, and then there's an automatic device that kicks it out so that the starter is not engaged while it's running. It's pretty sophisticated.
Interesting. Wow, I had no idea.
Quite often it's missing on these cars because people get frustrated. They can't find a working version, so they just convert it back over to something else. But this car has got so many original things that have never been modified or sacrificed. It's really quite interesting.
Well, there you go. There's the first point of many on what is a complete and original 41 Buick Roadmaster.
Yes. And remember, we got the big engine up there, so although it's extremely quiet and runs smooth, you can still feel the compression of the individual cylinders, because these are reasonably high compression for the period, and there's 8 cylinders and 2 carburetors, so that's why these things are so powerful.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Now, in order, when you first start out and the car's been sitting, it's important to put the clutch in, and when you take it up into second gear, what you're doing is you're stopping the rotation of the gears.
Okay.
Okay, if you just jump right into first gear, and even if you hit the clutch, your likely is you're going to grind something.
Okay.
So it's much better to stop the motion of the gears by going to the second and then down to first. It's just a habit you get into after a while.
Huh. All right.
So we don't have to worry about abusing the gears in the transmission. And go.
Okay. Now here we go.
They're very rugged transmissions. They're easy to rebuild, but there's no point in not taking good care of them.
Of course, right. Because after all, you're the custodian of a car.
Yeah, you're custodian of a piece of history. This is a full classic. It's one of the very few Buicks that's accepted as a full classic.
Oh, okay.
And there's a reason for it. The Classic Car Club of America is very stingy about who they accept into the Classic Car Club. They have a really strict series of guidelines that they use in order to judge whether a car is eligible or not. And for a long time, I think only the Buick Limited was accepted, and then not too awful long ago they accepted the Roadmaster as well.
Okay.
It's the same engine, it's the same powertrain as the Limited, and has a lot of the same features.
Did they make a limited convertible in this?
They never did. No.
Oh, they never did.
There was a 40 Limited Phaeton.
Okay.
And a friend of mine had one. It's about 187 feet long. Weighs 250 tons.
Right.
It'll run over a Volkswagen without even you noticing it. So, but it's a little bit big. A beautiful car. I mean, there's a picture of Shirley Temple, the child actress, in it, and she had one, and then she used to go around the Hollywood area in it in the back seat with the chauffeur drive. Right. Pretty cool. I've got a picture of her doing that. The
Interesting.
Buicks were always very high on people's list of quality cars, and they were able to drive Buicks when the self-image that people were trying to project, if they had self-image problems, they would drive a Cadillac. If they were knowledgeable buyers and wanted a really good car, they would buy a Buick.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's not just a opinion of mine, if you look carefully at the history of Buick Motor Division, it's always been the fair-haired child in the General Motors group, because of the people at Buick quite often would graduate up to the corporate level, up to GM management, and of course when they were thinking about who was going to get all the good stuff, they obviously preferred their buddies at Buick who were still there, and got a lot of the good stylists, obviously engineers, and Buick was very profitable. It hit that nice sweet spot between the less expensive Chevrolet Oldsmobile Pontiac and the Cadillac.
Yeah. Because
they had the perception of being a mid-range car, but it really wasn't. It was an upper-end car, and so it was priced pretty much like an upper-end car. So the profitability was good, and then the fact that they sold a lot of them made it even more profitable.
Right.
And as a result of that, in no less than 3 or 4, I believe, situations, the profits from Buick Motor Division actually saved General Motors from bankruptcy, because some of the other divisions would struggle and wouldn't have good sales and they'd lose a lot of money, but Buick was always the engine that made the money for General Motors.
Okay, so the profit was real steady. The profit margin.
Yeah, and it was a much bigger profit.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of cars being sold, and you had a very high profit per car, and so they were kind of an anachronism in automobiles, because almost every other car could be characterized as either an inexpensive car, a mid-range car, or an upper-end car. And Buick was really an upper-end car that was priced like a mid-range car. And so their sales were really quite impressive every year.
Okay, now on this particular Buick, I guess there's 2 ways of talking about original. What is, as far as original, as far as not modified from how the factory built it, I guess is one side of it, and the other is what's not been already restored. How do you look at this particular car?
Well, there's really nothing that I'm aware of at all. It's updated at all because of the drivability of the Buicks. By the time you get to the 40s, there really is no point to updating them. I mean, you could conceivably add a 51 Roadmaster automatic transmission. We have all of the gear to do that, so you could actually convert it to an automatic without changing the engine, which something a lot of people aren't aware of, but that could be done. But really, the drivability of the car is so good that
you wouldn't be tempted to change it.
You don't really miss the automatic quite as much as you would with some of the other cars that shift difficult, and the gear ranges are kind of clunky for modern driving. This car will drive along, as you can see, at 20-30 miles an hour, and it'll also go 80 miles an hour.
Right.
I'm in 3rd gear right now. I'm going 35 miles an hour, but I can go up to 80.
Right. Yeah, this car's got the power to do it, and it's nice and smooth and set up.
That's the secret, is the gearing and the engine have to be kind of tuned together to be able to perform. And this is the beginning in 41. This is right before World War II, but now the highway system was expanding and people were wanting to go faster. They were not limited to real small dirt roads, and where you couldn't go over 40 miles an hour. It wouldn't matter what kind of a car you had. You'd have a Duesenberg, you still can only go 40 miles an hour.
Right.
So this is the beginning of the modern car. It probably is the most, in my mind, having had a lot of Buicks completely across the spectrum, I absolutely believe it's the best Buick ever built, simply because it was the most modern car in that era, but it still has that classical look. So you're not penalized by a lack of features and bad braking and engines that don't have any power and that sort of thing.
So would it be fair, and I'm just kind of making this up, but I'm going to ask it as a question, would it be fair to say this is kind of a pre-war car that kind of stayed modern into the post-war era, because it was so well put together and so modern at the time. Is that fair?
It's exactly correct, because what happened, of course, is that everything went on hold just about the time this car was built. So it was the very last of the cars for 5 years.
Yeah.
They made a handful of 42s, and then World War II came along. There was not another car for public sale until 46. It's a long time between new cars. And so people hung on to their 41 Buicks and their 40 Buicks because they really had no choice. There was nothing else out there that they could replace it with, because cars were out of production. They had gone into the production of war machinery, and so cars were.
And I guess if a 41 like this was in good condition, there wouldn't really be a giant reason to get a 48 or something.
And they picked up after the war in 46, and you can't tell the difference between a 46 and a 41.
Okay.
There is no difference. It's the same engine, same steering.
Yeah, they kept the tooling for everything, I guess.
Yeah, well, the body panels are different.
Oh, are they? Okay.
But the interior of the car was, in terms of mechanics and brakes and that sort of thing, was identical.
Okay.
The hunger for new cars was so great that there really was no need to reinvent the wheel. People would buy literally anything that was available after World War II, and that meant that the 41s were preserved. A smattering of 42s were built, of course, and some even before were pressed into service because there just was no alternative. Yeah. But after the war, there was this great demand built up to buy new cars, and the guys came home from overseas and they wanted a new car. They'd saved up their money, and that was the first thing that they wanted to do when they got home. A lot of them was go out and buy a new car, and there weren't any new cars. It's kind of like there is right now. You depress the supply and you up the demand, and that's kind of what was going on.
Sure.
Now you notice that we're only going about 5 miles an hour, and the engine doesn't seem to care. And I'm in third gear, and the thing still has.
It was still just rolling along.
Still rolling along. It doesn't really seem to matter. That's because it has torque. Torque is distinctly different than horsepower. A lot of people don't understand the difference, but torque is a different thing altogether. It allows the pulling of the weight, let's put it that way. Horsepower, on the other hand, is a different thing. It expresses itself a lot more in the mid-range and in the high end. Yeah. But they're coupled together. They're a very powerful combination, and this car had both. You can see what I mean. I just pushed on the accelerator. I defy you to get into a 30s or 40s car that will go like that. Okay. Yeah, it just takes. It's real going. We can keep on going until we hit something, but we're not going to do that. Right. But I mean, it went to 50 miles an hour like that. Yep. We're going 50. We were going 5. Yeah. What? 3 seconds? Very quick. That's a modern acceleration time. Yeah, you're right. A modern car, some of them won't even do that. A lot of them won't do that. And this car is before World War II, so that's what makes this car so drivable, is that there's no great penalty. Some of the other cars with 6 cylinders and flathead 8s and 6s and that sort of thing, they just don't have any power. So you're always wanting more power. That's why they get hot rodded. That's why they get their engines ripped out and they put modern motors in them, because they don't have enough power to really be useful. Right. That's not a problem with a Buick. It has the same cubic inches as a Corvette. Right. So and what's the cubic inches on this one again? 320, and okay. When you rebuild it once, you're up to 330. You're right. Corvette, 60s Corvette is 327. So sure. Even the later ones were 350. So you got the same cubic inches. You got high compression engine and plenty of carburetors, a lot of gas available. Horsepower is what propels a car, not cubic inches. Cubic inches is an indication of horsepower, but it doesn't really guarantee you horsepower. Right. Yep. We could use some different metaphors for that, but that's right.
I'm thinking like a tractor that has all the torque and 40 horsepower.
And no, exactly. It doesn't need any horsepower.
Yeah.
In an automobile that's trying to go 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, it needs both.
Right.
It needs something to launch it, and it needs something to keep it going.
Yeah.
So that balance is what's important, and Buick understood that. Their whole mentality at Buick for many, many years has been racing. They actually had an Indianapolis car engine that they built and campaigned and very successfully for years, and that's the way they're built.
Yeah.
They're high performance. It's been a high performance company almost since its beginning in 1904.
Right.
They started out with the overhead valve when Ford and Packard and those guys were still putting flathead motors in them. And well, flatheads proved to be a good motor and reliable, but you can't even begin to compare them to an overhead valve. I mean, it has so much more potential.
Right.
And it's still around to this day. So it's 100 years of proven service.
That's right.
Flatheads died off half a century ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and if anyone wants to know about flatheads, we have some flathead V12 videos out there.
Yes, we do, but you need 12 flathead cylinders, okay? Has a little rub in the nose of an 8-cylinder guy, but yeah, you really need you need a lot of cylinders in cubic inches, and you need some better carburation that was available on originals.
Yeah. And
since we do that with our Zephyrs, you get a really good response out of them.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I know we're just rolling down this window, but can you tell me about this feature right here, this little piece of chrome that just follows the window?
This is a nicety that both Buick and Cadillac used in this era, and the reason is that if you don't have this rain can run in to the door.
Oh,
so they thought that through, and this thing has to pivot so that when the window comes up, it rides with it, and then when it goes down, it stays with it, which there's a spring load in this.
Wow. So much engineering for a little thing like
Buick
that.
was just full of that sort of thing all the time.
Okay, so JB, let's talk about this car and why it's a good representation of what you want to look for in a 41. If anyone was wanted to buy a 41 Roadmaster, especially a convertible here, what would they want to be looking for that this car represents that might not be present in a car they're looking at? What's special about this car?
Well, firstly, of course, the Sequoia cream paint job, which is kind of more or less a famous color combination for Buicks, and with the red leather interior. Of course, the two love each other. You know, that picks up with the red wheels and
I'm just going to pop this door open for a second and just show off the how it looks.
Exactly.
With the interior and because not everybody's going to really pick up on that.
No, but those two colors love each other. You could have used black, for instance, which would have really been dead looking. I've seen these cars in black and they shrink materially in size. There's no real bad color, but there are some that don't really do it justice. I'm not fond of black for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, it makes the car look really small, and it's also always dirty, which means you're cleaning it every 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it seems you also miss some detail sometimes. And because of the fact the car has this really low windshield, it really accentuates the look of the car because it is a bright color. But you don't want it to be, you know, some color that isn't like highly metallic. They had metallic colors in this era, and you could, for I believe it was $60, you could paint any Buick any color of a previous year. So if you wanted to paint a car a different color, you could look at the color palette that was existent, let's say 3 or 4 years prior, and you could take that color and use it for the color on the car that you're ordering. Cool.
And they would do that at Buick for a small additional charge. A lot of judges get confused by that at Buick meets and other classic car meets, that because they'll say, well, that color didn't come with that year, but that's just not the way it worked.
Okay. Now this is specifically a Roadmaster, so it has a longer hood.
That's
right?
great. It has a longer front end.
Okay.
It has a
Well, front
bigger
end is
engine,
longer.
has a different steering box.
Okay.
It has a number of things that are unique to the Roadmaster because it's a bigger car, it's a more powerful car, and so it has different mechanical aspects.
Okay.
Buick was not trying to fool people and just make a bigger car. Once you build a bigger car, obviously you need a bigger engine to power that bigger car.
Sure. Now, by the way, people are going to notice the sticker on the door.
Yes.
What is that from?
That's we were invited to go to the Biltmore show. That was a really tremendous car show, and you had to be juried in, and we've had a number of cars that were juried in, and so this is the car that was on the tour that was for people who were in it only, and so I've kind of kept it on it for sentimental reasons because we had a really great experience with this car and with the car we entered in the show.
Huh. Interesting. All right. So let's, giving people kind of some information on this car in particular, what to look for in a 41.
Right.
Someone might be looking at one to buy and not really be aware of some of the finer details. Now, there's a lot of chrome, a lot of pieces.
Right.
This is a complicated car.
Yeah, and in contrast to the 41 Cadillac, for instance, if you set them side by side, you'll notice something right away. You think the Buick has a lot of chrome on it until you see the Cadillac.
Oh, is that right?
And it looks like someone just took a garbage can full of chrome and just kind of broadcast it over the top. I'm being facetious, but it's just over the top. Remember, this is 1940. I mean, everything was going well. Everybody had come out of the recession, and they wanted to celebrate. They didn't want dark, dank, black cars.
Right.
They wanted something to celebrate the fact the economy was rolling again, and people were buying cars, and times were good.
So let's point out some details now. You mentioned that, like these chrome trim on the convertible top are often missing, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. Almost every car I've ever seen, whenever the top had been replaced, they unfortunately either lost or omitted these chrome strips, and those are almost always, like I say, missing.
Right.
And that's an accuracy detail that this car has. Okay. The rear window oftentimes is the wrong frame or the wrong size, or it's off a Chevy or a Pontiac.
Okay.
A lot of this stuff got thrown away in the process of changing the tops over the years.
Sure.
So the authenticity goes out the window, and if you don't, pardon that really bad pun, and they ended up with some other window frame, or they ended up with missing those trim strips. This also has the optional skirts, which also has optional dart detail on the skirt.
Okay, so those didn't all.
No,
all the Roadmasters
that was an
didn't
option.
That.
That was an option.
Okay, and you've got trim rings and hubcaps on the wheels.
These mud splash guards are an option.
Okay.
The chrome on the mud splash guard is an option.
Okay.
The trim on the bottom of the skirt is an option.
Wow. Okay.
So it has the power antenna is an option. I mean, this car is just loaded with lots and lots of these things.
Designed in 1940.
You got the fog lights in the front, which will almost always came without it, and a lot of people get confused about the lineage of these. That they were not made by GM. They were made by a company called Guide, and Guide was exclusively contracted to General Motors to provide their fog lights, and so that's why these are Guide lights and not necessarily Buick.
Huh.
And I've had some interesting discussions with people about that who were confused. But that is in fact
fog lamp.
Those are the correct fog lamps. And this car came with fog lamps. You could retrofit them, but you wouldn't have the appropriate switches on the dash, because of course the car didn't come with them originally, but this one came with all these things came on this car originally.
Wow.
So it was an absolute.
So now probably even some of this bumper trim is probably optional, I'm going to guess.
It's entirely likely, yes.
I don't know.
There's so much going on here that it's hard to say. A lot of it is just stock Buick
Yeah.
the grille, the the turn signal lights and all that.
And I know probably the rear view mirrors are probably not always.
Exactly. Those are an option. Everything is, well, not everything, but a lot of the things that are on this car, and most cars in that era were optional.
Yeah. Well, let's pop the hood for a second and just have a look at this
Right.
this engine.
Now, the Buicks were unique in this era in the sense that when you pull the hood ornament, there's also a secret bar you have to push right here.
Okay.
In order to get this open. If I just pull this and I'm trying to steal something,
it's not going to open.
It's not going to open.
So it's like a safety catch, I guess?
It's exactly what it is. So unless you know to push this in when you pull this up, it won't open.
Gotcha.
It also had the additional feature of being open from both sides. So if you wanted to access the engine from the right side, you could do that over here.
I see that prop rod has a clip on either side.
Exactly. And so this thing is hinged on both sides, which is very complicated.
Yeah.
Because now you have to drop this down, and now this becomes a hinge if you're going to open it from the driver's side.
So the latches and the hinges are
very
the
precise,
same thing.
very difficult to get adjusted correctly. But once you have them, they stay that way pretty much. But again, it's a matter of understanding how they work and having all the parts and pieces so that it works properly. But when you're trying to access the engine from the driver's side or the passenger side, you have that option. And later, of course, they came out with an alligator hood, which came up and was hinged on the cowl, which allowed that. But remember, in this period, earlier on, especially the late 30s, they had double-sided hoods.
Right, with a support in the middle.
One-piece hood that hinges on both sides.
Okay. Now, while we're looking under hood, I can see there are 2 carburetors.
Yes, indeedy, and
now,
they are big carburetors. Yes.
Thing?
All Roadmasters came with 2 carburetors.
Wow. Okay.
And of course, you had to have dual exhaust, and you had to have an air cleaner to accommodate the 2 carburetors. And they work extremely well. You can get 3 or 4 or 5 years out of a rebuild. We're on, I think, year number 1 or 2.
Now, one thing I wish we could do is present to people watching the beautiful aroma of the old.
That's not going to come across on the film, but it really is.
It's amazing. It's a nostalgic smell.
Yeah, the smell of the leather interior is just magical. It really is.
Okay, so speaking of leather, let's just go to that. We're going to want to go inside this car and look at the features there. But
now when you close it, you have to kind of drop it. So it goes over that clip, and then you just push that in, and now it's locked. Nobody can get access to it except the guy who owns it.
Right, they know how to do
thing.
it. So what are some of the other features inside here? Like there's a lot of chrome, there's a...
Well, the pattern of the door panels is important.
Okay.
That stitching is a certain distance, it's a certain height and width. Stitching has to be of a certain type. Then you've got these chrome bars along the bottom that are often missing. These plastic inserts on the handles are very, very fragile, something that we make at our company to replace. But this is really your first sign that this is a really good car, because very few companies would go to the trouble of having a door handle and a door crank that was that complicated. But Buick had no real limits in terms of interior styling and that sort of thing. They had the best people literally in the world, and if they felt like this was a better looking way to do a door handle, that's the way it got done.
Yeah, and so even the vent window is a crank out window.
Exactly, which of course wasn't common to a lot of less expensive cars.
Mm-hmm. So much chrome everywhere. I would just wonder, who knows how many separate pieces of chrome there are on this car altogether.
Well, it'd be over 100.
Certainly.
Have to be. And then when you come inside, you see we got the gauges.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's where you find out that this car was originally sold with fog lamps, because it's got the appropriate switch for it that's built into the dash.
How does the switch work?
You just pull it out.
Well, you pull it out. Okay.
Right, push it back.
Got it.
You got defroster, you got a lighter. This is, again, we talked about this with the Zephyrs. This is the rarest piece of metal on the planet, because woo!
The easiest thing to lose, for sure.
Especially a non-smoker got in here. He goes, I know how to stop this guy. Woo! And gone. or they just fell out or something. So it's got an operating map light. You got an ashtray for both people, if you notice. Okay.
Wow, yeah, passenger.
And you got an air vent over here for this guy. And
wow. Okay, there's a map light.
exactly. Lots and lots of
lights. What is the accessory? Do you know what that's for? Or,
probably the heater or a back seat heater. There were under seat heaters, and then there were heaters that would go both front and rear.
Okay. And so, okay, I'm going to ask you about this.
That's for the windshield wipers.
That's a windshield wiper switch.
Yeah,
okay.
right. And that's a vacuum switch.
Okay.
So the engine has to be running in order for it to operate.
Wow.
Lots and lots of good stuff.
So many things.
Yep. And this is another really rare feature that's almost never present. This bracket right here gives you the ability, when the thing is coming down, to pull the top down, and then you latch it with the center latch and the side latches. But this piece is very, very good representation of the way it used to be, but these are almost never present.
Wow.
They're almost always gone, and the stitching is almost always wrong. The guy who did the trim on this is just an amazing guy, and we used a very very expensive, very durable Hart's cloth when we redid the top, because the earlier canvas tops, after a number of ups and downs, simply got marked or damaged and started looking really funky.
Yeah, they show wear quickly, huh?
Yeah, they do. And most of these cars lived in heated garages. This one obviously was babied most of its life, and I found it in a heated and cool garage in the Midwest. And I don't think it's ever been outdoors except to drive it.
Huh. Wow. So I guess for the last little piece, we should look in the trunk.
Yep.
And show people what that looks like.
Yep.
And then we should probably drop the top.
Yep. We can do
how
that.
that works.
We can sure do that.
Well, it's obviously got a strong support.
Yep.
Those
Yeah.
rods, and look at that trunk.
Yeah. Now that's exactly the correct material for the trunk on a 41 Buick.
Beautiful.
I don't think I've ever seen one in better shape. It's almost completely, totally perfect. The jack is present, so
it's got a nice
almost
built-in
always
shelf
missing
for the
as well.
spare and the jack.
Right, and this gives you a place to go on top, but it also leaves the tire out and accessible,
Right.
so that you can get to it readily. And then this is a hole down that quite often, again, is missing.
I'm sure.
And because people just throw the tire in there.
Right.
And,
and we're talking about years and years and years.
Oh yeah, this is
things get lost.
a lot of
so
years.
this, again, this is what a correct trunk would look like.
Exactly. Exactly.
Very good. All right. Well, I think what we need to do next is just get that top down. Let's find out how hard it is to put the top down. Because this is the 40, so it's got to be very painful.
No, you know what?
painful to
In
get the top down.
1940,
Yeah.
they were still struggling with tops, but this one, they kind of got it together and made it a fairly simple to operate.
Okay.
You got to put it in neutral.
Okay.
Start the engine.
Okay.
Okay, and then you pull. Now there's a lever down here under the dash
Okay.
that operates the top. Now you got to
Okay.
make sure that it's loose.
Okay.
It's nothing dumber than trying to get the top to go up and it's still latched.
Yeah, that would be a mistake.
Well, we've done it before.
Oh, wow. That's so fast, I wasn't quite ready for it.
Is that fast enough for you?
That was amazing.
If 4 seconds isn't fast enough, go buy another car and see how
Wow.
fast
Okay, let me just get a shot of this with the top down.
Okay.
'Cause-
Also, if you notice, it goes way down into a well, unlike some cars that stick up.
Right. It's not sticking up on
Right,
top.
exactly.
Man, that looks so sleek.
Yeah.
That is very cool. All right, well, at this point, I'm looking forward to
You
going
would
for a
look good
ride.
in this car. Anybody would look good in
Yeah,
this.
of course.
You want to put it up?
What's that?
You want to put the top up?
Well, whatever you like. You can see how that works too. Let's do it.
It works better if you do it a few times.
Right.
There's a little bit of a pause. Now here's where it gets tricky. You gotta make sure it doesn't come down too fast. So just kind of modulate the switch.
Okay.
Make sure you get your hand up here and just kind of help it come down gently. And you pull it down. Okay.
Okay.
And any one of these three will restrain it if you're in a hurry. And that cam has got it where it can't come up. Okay.
Right.
We'll put it back down again.
Okay.
Get that out of the way.
Don't forget the center latch. You got it? There we go.
That's why I tested it.
Okay. That is something.
Now, a Mercedes-Benz today isn't any faster than that. Just to give you an idea.
There you go. All right, well, let's go for a little spin now with the top down.
Yeah, man.
Make sure we have our sunscreen on, right?
Yes, indeed. And we got our smile on.
Right.
Anybody who drives around in one of these with a frown, you got to wonder what in the heck is wrong with them.
That's right.
You notice how this thing starts out? You hear it? There's so much torque that you don't need any gas. You just point it and it wants to go somewhere.
Right. Okay.
It makes that wonderful sound. Here's what I'm going to show you what torque does.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to stop the car and then I'm going to start out in second gear, which is really difficult to do with almost any other car. Okay.
Okay.
It's a dead stop, right? We're going to start out in second.
Okay.
Try that in Europe. Try that in another car.
Yeah, no problem at all, right?
Not going to happen. No, it's because the torque is always there waiting. That's why when you're in third gear and going down the freeway and you jump on the gas, that second carburetor kicks in and it goes from 60 to 70 so fast it'll scare you. Just flow right in with the modern traffic without any problem at all.
That's wonderful. So,
And
I
you
guess
can stay in second. You don't need to be shifting all the time.
I just have another angle of this question here. Full classics, are they almost or even completely pre-war?
No, it's really based on the way they were built, their quality, their importance in the automotive history.
Okay.
And do they play a role in the advancement of automotive history? They have a number of criteria that they use, and it's very difficult to get classic car designation.
Right.
But Buick clearly was always a good candidate, and they finally accepted it. It's quite a while ago now.
Right. Wonderful. Go ahead and just...
You notice how quiet it is?
It's very quiet.
You can actually talk at a normal tone without having to scream.
Right.
Now, so if this was a Ford, we'd be saying things like, "Hi, Fred, how you doing?" I can't hear you. What'd you say? You know.
Right.
Just a little humor there. I have Fords. I love Fords, but
right.
They don't sound.
Yeah, I mean,
like
you have
this.
a Ford convertible, so you know.
Yes, they don't sound
it's all
like
good.
this thing.
You're not.
They talk to you. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, this is a very elegant, and
really
peaceful
is.
Vibe that comes out of it.
Yeah, it really is, and it'll just do this all day long.
Yeah.
And if you notice, it never gets hot. It's at 100 degrees, and we've been driving around for what, 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, longer than that.
It hasn't even got up to 100 yet. And it's what, 80 degrees?
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Hear that second carburetor kick?
Yeah.
Now you get to
That's
find
got
the best
some
part of
power.
it. Watch the stop. I didn't do
Wow.
that full stop because it'd probably scare the hell out of you.
Yeah, probably
It
would.
will It will
put me
stop.
through the
Oh
windshield
my
just
God,
about.
yeah. I tell people to plant their feet.
Yeah.
Well, in a panic stop, that you need that. I mean, look
Sure.
there's a lot of people that are not terribly good drivers.
Yeah. That happens.
Yes, it does happen. And you need to be able to stop.
Right.
And you're an old car that has bad brakes. I mean,
Yeah.
probably not a safe situation. So the cars that I have all have good brakes. I don't own them, and I darn sure don't take my family out in a car that can't start, can't stop, and can't run.
Right. Right.
So, you know, drivability means they have to be able to stop in a panic situation.
Yeah.
You have no control over what the guy in front of you is going to do. So you need to be able to stop safely and
well, 40 miles an hour in first gear. That's really something.
that's 60 right there.
That's amazing.
No muss, no fuss. It just does it.
Just does it. Yeah.
Remember, this car is how many years old?
Let's see, 41. I feel like it's 81 years old.
Yep. You'd never know it, would you?
Wow.
You really don't.
No, I wouldn't. You'd
And I
never
think
know.
that's
You're right.
the best thing you can say about a car is that you become unaware of its age after you've driven it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
some cars were really drivable that long ago, and some of them just weren't.
Now, one thing I don't want to overlook, this dash panels.
Yeah,
They're
there's
so
machine
beautiful.
turn panels.
So that's called machined.
Yeah, they were machine turn. They nickel plated them, and then you take a machine, a Cratex, and a machine, and it makes those marks.
Huh. It's beautiful.
And then they overlap, and that's how you get that machine turn look. That was really usually only used on European cars.
Okay.
Some of the Spano Suezes, and
So that is a factory thing, the Buick
it is
did,
a
though?
factory thing in 40 and 41.
Okay.
But that was the only year that they had it. And a lot of people consider this to be the most beautiful dash ever put on an
It
automobile.
is gorgeous.
It really is
Kind of an Art
exceptional.
Deco.
Yep. But it's a
beautiful.
beautiful combination of things
Yeah.
that isn't overdone and isn't underdone.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes, indeed.
Very nice. Well, thank you for the tour of the
Sure.
41 Buick Roadmaster Convertible.
Yes, sir.
It's fantastic. Thanks, JB.
You bet.
Thanks, as always, for coming along. Please subscribe if you are interested in more. We'll continue to bring more content as we can and try to make it as interesting and accurate as possible. And thanks for watching.